Boxy. We're live. Hi, this is Larry Harnish, and this is Boxy with the Ask Me Anything on the Black Dahlia case for February 2025. If you're new, I started doing the Ask Me Anything on the Black Dahlia case on the first Tuesday of the month, 10 a.m. Pacific time. And, warning. Last podcast on the left calls me the world's grumpiest man. You should just know that. Now, if that's a problem, you should let me know, or something. Okay, if you're new, and I got some new people from Reddit recently. I do the Ask Me Anything on the Black Dahlia case because I got fed up with the low quality of the true crime TV shows and podcasts, the whole true crime industrial complex. I just got fed up with it. I don't do them. And then after doing them for a little bit, I had to split off all the George Hodel and Steve Hodel questions. So no George Hodel and Steve Hodel questions today. Those are on another Ask Me Anything that I do on the third Tuesday of the month. And that will be February 18th at 10 a.m. And let me point out, I stopped doing Instagram. I'm tired of providing free content for Mark Zuckerberg. Sorry. So only YouTube. Okay. So this will be the Black Dahlia session. I usually get a troll. I have a monitoring system in place, and I don't put up with any abuse. They get reported immediately. So, yeah. Okay. So the way this works for new people is that I will talk for a little bit, and then I will open it up to live questions. I'll take questions from the chat, and I will take submitted questions. And I will say that I have got a bunch of submitted questions already. I may not get to everything because there's a lot. I'll do my best, but I may not get to everybody's questions simply because there's a lot of them. There's a lot to talk about. Anyway, so first of all, people ask about the book. Where am I with the book? At this point, I am 169,000 words as of last Friday into the book. I have finished part one. Part one is the life of Elizabeth Short. Part two, which is what I'm working on now, is the investigation. And at this point in the investigation, I am writing about the autopsy of Elizabeth Short. And this is a portion of the case that really requires a lot of attention. Certain people have fabricated things about the autopsy, or they like to say, well, these people didn't know what they were doing, and so the autopsy was bungled. First of all, the coroner's files on the autopsy of Elizabeth Short are sealed. Okay, they're sealed at the request of the LAPD. There's two versions of that. Sometimes some people say they're missing. Other people say that they're sealed at the request of the LAPD. It seems to be more accurate that they are sealed at the request of the LAPD. So all we have in the way of her autopsy is what was read into the record at the inquest. And what was the inquest? The inquest they don't do them anymore. So a little trial. And they would have somebody, Phoebe Short identified who she was. Red Manley talked about the last time he saw her. Various police officers testified. And the last person to testify in the inquest was Frederick Newbar, the autopsy surgeon. And he read the autopsy into the record, but what happened was there was so much done to Elizabeth Short that at one point the deputy coroner who was presiding over the inquest just cut him off and said, "Can you please just say what killed her?" And what killed Elizabeth Short was shock, concussion and loss of blood. Um, so that was what killed her. Anyway, but I need to emphasize that the autopsy of Elizabeth Short was state of the art for 1947. Frederick Newbar was a distinguished medical examiner. He had a long career with the coroner's office. He was very good. He was well respected. So it's not really accurate to say that, oh, well, the autopsy was bungled or whatever. No, it was state of the art. Again, for 1947, people would, it would be done different today, but that's how it was. And so because of all the stuff that has kind of crept up about the autopsy of Elizabeth Short, I need to evaluate that and investigate that with some care. So it's a slow and deliberate process. Anyway, that's what I am doing as of this moment on the book. Now, top of the news, top of the Black Dahlia news. Someone sent to me a little blurb off of Publishers Marketplace that there is a new Black Dahlia book in the works. What? Yes. I will read the blurb. William J. Mann, author of Tinseltown, The Contender, Bogey and Bacall, and Kate, is got Black Dahlia book. And the blurb says a definitive account of the 1947 murder of Elizabeth Short that humanizes the victim, situates the notorious cold case within an anxious country grappling with new ideas, demographics, and technologies, and offers a bold theory on who may have killed her. Oh, interesting. The book is moving from HarperCollins to Simon & Schuster, repped by Malaga Baldi. Okay, so reading between the lines there, okay, who is William Mann? He writes Hollywood scandal books like The Murder of William Desmond Taylor, stuff like that. This is going to be the definitive account. Okay, if you say so. But notice what it says about situating the notorious cold case within an anxious country grappling with new ideas, demographics, and technologies. That tells me there's going to be a lot of padding about the situation of America after World War II, which is an interesting subject, but frankly, it sounds like a lot of padding. I could be wrong, but it's easy to get lost in the context. I will tell you now, having researched the Black Dahlia case for a little bit. And the bold theory on who may have killed her is like, well, okay, who's it going to be? Howard Hughes? Louis B. Mayer? I don't know. But one of the more significant things is that the book has moved from HarperCollins to Simon & Schuster. What does that mean? Well, it could mean a number of things. It could mean that Harper took a pass on the book. It could mean that an editor, whoever was editing this, moved from one publisher to another. There's a couple of interpretations on it. But yes, there is a new book in the works on the Black Dahlia. Now, here's what's interesting. When somebody sent me this blurb, I was like, oh, okay. And I forgot that William Mann had emailed me. I forgot that. Oops. I got a lot. He asked to interview me, and I said no. But he wrote to me in July 2023. And so if you know anything about the publishing world, this is a really quick turnaround. If he was working on the book in 2023 and it's coming out this year, that is a really rapid turnaround. But William Mann wrote to me, and I will kind of summarize his email. He wrote to me in July of 2023. He's gone through my website. He likes the Ask Me Anything. He's been contracted by HarperCollins to do a book on the Black Dahlia case. Yes, another one. And here he says, except mine isn't about trying to solve the case. Well, apparently that's out the window, and he's got a bold new theory. But again, it's going to be all about, the demographics and all that kind of thing. Although I won't be offering any new solution, I will be putting forward those that have been offered in the past. And he says, I share your feelings that there is no evidence whatsoever that connects George Hodel to the murder. Likewise, I thought the recent book proposing Leslie Dillon as the killer selectively presented only evidence that bolstered the author's theory, while ignoring the overwhelming, in my opinion, evidence that exonerated him. Okay, so, and he says, well, Walter Bailey is the only person that cannot be disproven that isn't contradicted by the evidence. And then anyway, and he said, would you do an interview? And I said, no. And he said, well, okay, I've got all the documentation, the LAPD files, DA files, FBI files. At this point, he was heading to the Medford Historical Society to see what they've got. He's interviewing family members of various figures in the case. I'm not sure who's left for him to interview in 2023, but whatever. Anyway, I told him no. I told him that if HarperCollins wanted a book on the Black Dahlia case, they could contact me. I never heard from them. So that's the inside story on William Mann. Will the William Mann book on the Black Dahlia ever see the light of day? I don't know. Maybe not. I won't hold my breath. So, the reality is that there is no way to do a credible job researching the Black Dahlia case if he started in 2023 and the book is going to come out in 2025. It's way too complicated to do anything more than a gloss over the case. That's it. Because first of all, you have to learn the case, and then you have to learn what's irrelevant. Because when you go through Boxy, there's all kinds of irrelevant stuff in there, and you can get lost. And the same thing with the FBI file, because it wasn't an FBI case. So we'll wait and see. We'll see what happens. All quiet so far. And the other thing I want to talk about before I open it up for questions is this is kind of a carryover from the last George Hodel sessions. But it has sort of a wider answer that I want to address. The fellow asked, how do I talk to people who believe that, okay, George Hodel didn't kill Zodiac. He didn't do all of that, but they still believe he killed the Black Dahlia. How do you talk to people like that? And I didn't really answer the question well, so I want to say it here. You can't. I mean, and it's beyond George Hodel. Whether it's the George Hodel people or the Patrick S. O'Reilly people or the Mark Hansen people, people latch on to a scenario and they won't let go. You can't talk them out of it. You absolutely cannot talk reason to somebody. They've made up their mind. And you can talk all day about, no, here's this and this and this, and it just bounces off their cranium. And it's amazing some of the scenarios that people will approach me with and say, how about this, but I've solved it. I was contacted by a Mark Hansen person, and who was absolutely convinced, yep, Mark Hansen did it, blah, 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 and it's like, no, he was thoroughly investigated. I used to be sort of a resource there was an extension writing course offered by Harvard, and it was run by a former LA Times colleague. And he said, would you be willing to talk to my students about the Black Dahlia case? And it's like, yeah, sure, and I will present them with various, scenarios or whatever. And it was sort of a creative nonfiction course, I think. It's been a while. But some of these students would come up with absolutely wild solutions to the Black Dahlia case. And there was one lady who was absolutely convinced that Paul DeRiver killed the Black Dahlia. Who's Paul DeRiver? Paul DeRiver was the LAPD police psychiatrist who got involved in all the in evaluating all the sex criminals and stuff like that. And he was in charge. You know, he was the one who kind of headed the Leslie Dillon investigation. That's Paul DeRiver. Well, this lady was absolutely certain that Paul DeRiver did it, killed the Black Dahlia, and she was all set to go fly down to Louisiana. That's where Paul DeRiver was from. He's from Louisiana. Fly down to Louisiana and dig through all this stuff. And it's like, yep, Paul DeRiver did it. And you can't talk people out of this stuff. I mean, it's like, you know, they live in a logic-proof compartment. I don't know what it is. But anyway, people treat the Black Dahlia case like a game of Clue, where it's got to be one of these known people. You know, it's Colonel Mustard in the conservatory with a wrench or something like that. Anyway, how do you talk to people like that? You don't. You know, there's so many people who are just absolutely convinced, oh, it's Patrick O'Reilly. And you can't talk them out of it. I don't even bother anymore. Okay. Let's go to the questions here. Is it possible that Elizabeth Short was bisected and drained of her blood outside a private dwelling, for example, in a medical facility? Okay. We don't know. It was, I think, when I talked to John Douglas, his advice, his insight was that it was a detached dwelling. Wherever it was, the killer would have to be darn sure that he wasn't going to be interrupted while he was doing everything that was done to Elizabeth Short. Okay, that we know, that we can be certain of. So a medical facility that would be closed for, you know, a while. It's really hard. You know, they don't know. The original investigators really don't know where. They thought for a while that they knew, but no. And I should point out that one of the reasons people hang on to these things so much is it's just a human characteristic. It's human nature. People want an explanation, and they don't deal well with saying we don't know. We don't know. You know, we don't know where she was killed. People have a very hard time with that. They will just throw something in there. It's as if a bad answer is better than no answer. So it's definitely possible. Okay. Bert asks, okay, you mentioned in today's Ask Me Anything that Elizabeth's body was cut in half for transportation reasons. If this were the case, then why bother cutting her in half in a clean surgical manner? Seems contradictory on the murderer's part. No, it doesn't. This is who he was. He did that because that's who he is, and that's how he did things. So, you know, it's really that simple. And it's telling that he did it that way. That's how he was. That's how this individual, whoever killed Elizabeth Short, that's how he went about it. Okay, let's see. Dylan asked, okay, is the direction of the body, Black Dahlia's body, relevant? Why wasn't the body disposed of on the other side of the avenue? We don't know, Dylan. We don't know that. We don't know why. You would have to get into the killer's mind to do that, and we just don't know. Is the simple answer. Okay. Let's see. Okay, back down to a submitted question here. Okay. Quick question for today's Ask Me Anything on the Black Dahlia case. I remember that at one point, when you were outlining the case, you had built on Walter Bailey. You had stressed that a possible motive for his murderous rage against Elizabeth Short may have been a sob story she told about having lost a baby son, a lie or delusion on her part. You speculated that because he had truly lost a son, an event that apparently left his family emotionally damaged, her delusional tale might have driven him over the edge. I'm wondering if you still think that was a possible motive. Okay. What am I talking about here? one of the individual that I have been studying for a connection to the Black Dahlia case is a doctor, a surgeon named Walter Bailey, who lived a block from the crime scene on Norton Avenue, and whose daughter was friends with Elizabeth Short's oldest sister. That's the connection. And back in when I shot James Ellroy's Feast of Death in 2001, I outlined that. In other words, Walter Bailey, and do I still think that's a motive? Well, I have a lot to say about that. First of all, none of the facts have changed. Did Walter Bailey have a son? Yes, he did. Was that son killed in a car accident? Yes, he was. Did Elizabeth Short claim that she had a son? Yes. Did she say that it died? Yes. Was that true? No. I mean, none of the facts have changed, so I don't see any reason to alter that scenario. But in terms of a motive, I will defer to Vincent Bugliosi, his opening statement in Tate LaBianca, which is very well written. What does he tell the jury in the opening statement? I don't have to give you a motive. What? Yeah. The prosecution in a criminal trial doesn't need to provide a motive. And what Bugliosi says, and I think I posted it on my blog, a motive can be a powerful argument, but it's not necessary. And eventually he came up with Helter Skelter. But yeah, so none of the facts have changed. Is that the scenario that I lend credence to? Yeah, simply because none of the facts have changed, and I don't see any reason to alter my view of that. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll back here. Who sent the telegram to Elizabeth Short that read, "A promise is a promise to a person of the world"? We don't know. We that it was unsigned. I know it's not signed. I spent a long time trying to analyze that telegram, or photographs of the telegram, because I don't know where the original is. And Western Union had a date and a timestamp, but unfortunately in the photographs, it's somewhat illegible. We can see what year it was sent. And for a long time, sorry, Steve Hodel detour. For a long time, Steve Hodel was claiming that his father sent it, of course, until I said, okay, well, we can read the year on the telegram that it was sent. And it's like, no. So, but the actual date and time, I think that's illegible. But we don't know who sent it. Okay, let's see here. What do you know about Elizabeth Short's final Christmas? Okay. Elizabeth Short's final Christmas would have been December 1946. She was in San Diego. She was staying with a French family, and okay, let me back up. Elizabeth Short went down to San Diego for the last month of her life. She took the bus to San Diego. She had told everybody that she was going up to the Bay Area to spend the holidays with her oldest sister, Virginia. Not true. Like so many of Elizabeth Short's stories, not true. She got on the bus down to San Diego. A ticket to San Diego was half the price of the bus ticket to San Francisco. And she went to the theater. And there were half a dozen all-night movie theaters in San Diego in December 1946. Well, she went to one of them, and she made friends with a young woman who was the cashier there, Dorothy French. And so Elizabeth Short was spending the night in this all-night movie theater, and Dorothy French said, hey, you can come home and stay with us. And so Elizabeth Short spent a month with the French family, which was Dorothy French and her mom, Elvira French. They lived in a place called Bayview Terrace, which was government housing for government employees on the outskirts of San Diego. And the reason the French family qualified for that is because Elvira French was a nurse at the Navy Hospital in Balboa Park. So they qualified for government housing. So that's where Elizabeth Short was in December of 1946. To the best of my recollection, and I haven't looked at it for a while, I covered that part of Elizabeth Short's life a while back, so I'm relying on my memory here. But I think she spent Christmas with the French family, and I think she had a date I think she had a New Year's Eve date. I think it was with a guy named Sam Navarro. When Elizabeth Short was in San Diego, she met a number of men, as she did. One of whom was Red Manley, and there was a guy named Sam Navarro, and I think she spent New Year's Eve with him. Christmas, I think, with the French family. I think. Again, I'm relying on my memory there. Okay. Let's see. Where are we here? Telegram. Okay. Why do you think Elizabeth Short used to fictionalize her life so much? Well, that's a great question. Thank you. I think for a number of reasons. I think she sort of she kind of created her own reality. I think part of it was to get attention. Part of it was to create sympathy. It's hard to know exactly when she started doing it, but we know that certainly by 1946, she had invented this. I'm backing up a little bit. Elizabeth Short was engaged to a fighter pilot named Matt Gordon. Okay, they were engaged, and then he died in the final days of the war, and so she would tell various stories about how they were engaged or married. She would sometimes say that they were married. She would sometimes say that they had a son who died. That was one of her common stories. But she had a whole repertoire of stories to get sympathy from people. Sometimes for money, people would feel sorry for her and give her a few bucks. That was kind of one of her techniques. But eventually, she created this alternative reality. I think what she was doing with Phoebe, the mom, I think she was doing what a lot of, I mean, it's in A Star Is Born. If you've seen the Janet Gaynor version of A Star Is Born, Janet Gaynor is writing these letters back home about things are growing great in Hollywood. Well, they're not really. But I think with the mom, she was telling the mom that because she didn't want the mom to worry. But I think part of it was just she chose to create her own reality. Anna, where, when, why did Beth get the rose tattoo? Tattoos on women in those days were quite scandalous. Indeed, they were. We don't know. We do know for sure that she had one. There's no question about that, regardless of what some people will say. I think it was on, I'm relying on my memory now. I believe it was on the middle of her left thigh. I think that's where it was. Where she got it, I'm not sure. Why she got it, again, I'm not sure. The whole thing about Elizabeth Short's persona that she was doing here in Los Angeles, at least, is that she was from Boston. She was from this very fine Boston family, and she was scandalized by what was going on, how they did things in Los Angeles, and so it's really unclear. We only have a couple of pictures of her in a bathing suit. There are a few, if you've seen them, I think they're online. But she's got sort of a modest two-piece bathing suit. The bottom has sort of it's a little skirt kind of thing. And the way she's sitting is you really can't see her left leg. You can't see if it's there. So I don't know. Um, but we do know that she had one based on the comment, and she had it by 1943. And we know that because, again, I'm relying on my memory, but I think that's when she got arrested in Santa Barbara was in 1943. And the police matron who arrested her said, yeah, she had a rose tattoo. She liked to sit so that it showed. So at least by then, she had one. And yes, they were quite scandalous. And yeah, okay. Oh, Will Fowler claimed that he was the first on the scene and he was photographed standing over the body. Does this photo exist? He says 2 photos were taken, but the paper ran the one with just the body of Short. That is total bullshit from Will Fowler. None of that happened. Will Fowler told me the same story, and he would further say that the arriving police officers drew their guns, and I interviewed one of the police, and what was really funny was I told Will, I interviewed one of the first police officers on the scene, and he got very nervous about, gee, I wonder if they will remember pulling their gun on me. And of course, that didn't happen. That didn't happen at all. Will Fowler was one of the last people to the crime scene. He made all of that up. And he made up a lot more. I mean, and Will Fowler's kind of a sore point with me. I treated Will Fowler like a friend. I would take him to lunch. He would tell me stories about the past. I kind of felt sorry for him because Will was estranged from a lot of his family. I can see why. He had a brother, Gene Fowler Jr., that he didn't talk to. But Will Fowler, if you're new to the story, Will Fowler was a reporter for the Los Angeles Examiner who was at the crime scene. He's in some of the photos. He's with Harry Hansen, the lead detective. He's the guy who's kind of crouching on the sidewalk, sort of squinting at the body. And there's a picture of Will and Harry Hansen standing on the sidewalk. The reality is Will Fowler was one of the last people there. That's the real story. And as I get into more and more about the coroner's office, I am finding that, Will Fowler lied about his stories about the coroner's office as well. The guy just lied his head off to me, but he lied to everybody. But yeah, it was an unfortunate lesson. When Elizabeth Short left the Biltmore, do you think she was heading back to the bus station to retrieve her luggage? No idea. I don't know where she went. Nobody knows. No one really knows. I mean, you can kind of play this mental game, but no one really knows. And anybody who tells you that that she went to the Crown Jewel cocktail lounge, no. You cannot, and it's in Boxey. They investigated the heck out of the Crown Jewel cocktail lounge. And as far as anybody knows, she was never there. The Crown Jewel cocktail lounge comes into the story because, and this is the other thing that Elizabeth Short would do. Elizabeth Short was a sponge. If you told Elizabeth Short a story about something happening to you, she would incorporate that into her stories about her life. And she would repeat your story as if it happened to her. And this was particularly with Ann Toth. Ann Toth was a roommate at the home of Mark Hansen, who had a share of the Florentine Gardens, had some theaters, and he let Elizabeth Short stay at his home initially with Margie Graham, and then Elizabeth Short and Margie Graham got kicked out. He kicked them out. And then after Margie Graham left LA, Elizabeth Short came back. And so there was another woman living at Mark Hansen's house named Ann Toth. Long explanation about why she was living there that I won't get into. But Ann Toth really was an aspiring actress. She had bit parts in movies. There's pictures of her in acting classes and that kind of thing. And so Ann Toth would talk about, her experiences as an actress. And Elizabeth Short would just absorb these things. and then repeat Ann Toth's stories as if they happened to her. And one of uh, Ann Toth's boyfriend had an office around the corner from the Crown Jewel Cocktail Lounge, and so Ann Toth would talk about the Crown Jewel Cocktail Lounge, and Elizabeth Short just incorporated the stories about the Crown Jewel Cocktail Lounge in her line of pattern. Totally fictional. I mean, you have to realize in fictionalizing her life, Elizabeth Short would go to the point where she would tell people that she had a job um, at a restaurant out in the valley. She didn't, but she would get up in the morning, she would get dressed, she would leave for work, be gone all day, and come back with stories about what happened during her day. Totally fictional. Absolutely totally fictional. And this is the woman, the young lady. Remember, she was 22 when she was killed. This is the young lady you're dealing with. I mean, it's she's not an easy character to get down on paper. Okay, let's go back over here. You mentioned that you think the LAPD lying about the evidence in the case being missing because they're afraid of someone filing a freedom of information request. Did you want to file it? Oh, I did. The answer is no. I did that. Absolutely not. As long as it's an open case, no one is getting access to the LAPD files. And I will go further on the record and say the LAPD isn't going to open the Black Dahlia files as long as Steve Hodel is alive. No, because they'd have to give it to him, and they sure as heck are not going to give it to him. So no. Let's see. Okay, let me go over here. Is there some kind of gathering every year at the Biltmore to commemorate her disappearance? No, there is not, and I hope there's not. I go. One of my little things is to go to the Biltmore on the anniversary of her disappearance, January 9th. I get a cup of coffee from the bar, and I just sit in the lobby and absorb what's going on. And thankfully, this year there was nobody there. There was one woman on a Zoom, very animated, sort of on FaceTime or Zoom call or something like that. And otherwise, it was just people walking through. People take the same picture. And if you know the Biltmore, the old lobby of the Biltmore at all, there's this staircase that comes down. And people stand at the head of that staircase and they pose and they take pictures, and someone down below takes a picture of them. It is like a Kodak moment. And that happens pretty frequently, but no, there is no ceremony. There is no, and I hope there never is. People need to do their own private thing. Okay. Morning, Allie. When was the last known time that Beth had a job? Anywhere, anytime? Okay. To the best of my knowledge, her fiance, Matt Gordon, was killed in the very end of the war, 1945. And she was working at a cafe in, I think it was Harvard Square. And she gave 2 weeks notice and she never worked again. That was it. She went down to Florida, came back up to Medford, and then in the summer of 1946, she shipped her luggage to Indianapolis. Why? Nobody knows. Absolutely nobody knows why she went to Indianapolis. Not a clue. Was there very briefly, then stopped in Chicago briefly, and then she came on to LA. So that was the last time that she worked. Okay, Paul. Why do you think Short's killer sent the envelope with Short's belonging to the Examiner? Doesn't that seem like a serial killer move? For example, the prime suspect in the Cleveland Torso murder sent taunting postcards to Ness. Okay. What are we talking about here? We are talking about the envelope that was mailed to the Los Angeles Examiner and other newspapers that contained items from Elizabeth Short's purse. There was her address book, snapshots, her birth certificate, business cards, little random scraps of paper, stuff like that. Well, I happened to talk to John Douglas about that and notice the difference in this. The prime suspect, and I don't know anything about the Cleveland Torso killers. I'm not going to, I don't care about that. Sent taunting postcards to Ness. Okay. John Douglas's take is this. Okay. Why did he send that stuff? Because he didn't send it to the police. He sent it to the newspapers. Okay. Why would you do that? Publicity. And that was John Douglas's take on it. The reason he sent it to the newspapers is the killer wanted publicity. And he got it. That is what happened. As far as a serial killer move, no. And I should point out emphatically that only the mailing with her stuff, the items for her, was considered legitimate. There was a lot of other mail that was sent to the police and the newspapers and everything else. That was all crackpots and pranksters. I think a few people were trying to be helpful, but beyond that, no, really only the one with her belongings was legit. I know that Elizabeth Short went south on Olive Street. How do you know that? How do you know that? They don't know that. Van Halen backing Isolated? No, we don't know that. Sorry. No one knows. It is said in, it's in Boxy, and the source for that is a guy named Studholme, who I think he was bell captain. And here's what happened. Elizabeth Short was killed. She was a Jane Doe for a while. Then the FBI identifies her, but they don't know anything about her movements. So then they have to talk to the French family, and they identify, well, this guy who picked her up, who had the Studebaker, the traveling salesman. So Red Manley is identified. So all of that stuff had to happen. And so Red Manley then says, yeah, I left her at the Biltmore. Well, this is, and I'm relying on a couple of weeks after January 9th when he left her at the Biltmore. And so they go to the staff at the Biltmore and they say, do you remember this woman? And Harry Hansen was very diffident about, well, they thought they maybe recognized her. Maybe they thought they did. But again, none of that is positive. None of that is for certain. They thought they saw her going to the telephones. They thought maybe. I think there's a line in there that says, well, she went outside like somebody in a car had signaled her. Honestly, they don't know. They don't know they honestly don't know where she went or even what direction she went when she left the Biltmore. They don't know. It's a hard thing to swallow, but they just don't know. Okay. Did Elizabeth Short write the names in her address book in alphabetical order? Is there anything to indicate the first letters of the names on the pages were torn from Elizabeth Short's address book on the remaining entries? No. Okay, what am I talking about here? Elizabeth Short's so-called address book. When Elizabeth Short was staying with Mark Hansen, she grabbed an old pocket calendar, okay? And she was using it as an address book. And she would meet somebody, she would write their name in it, but there was absolutely no organization to that thing at all. When you read the police descriptions of it, they couldn't figure out. There was absolutely no order. It seems likely that she was using it something like an address book, in that it's not just her handwriting in there. There's other handwriting in there also. It's entirely possible that she would hand the address book to somebody and have them sign, their name and number. And remember, a lot of people didn't give Elizabeth Short their right name. Red Manley is a perfect example of somebody who, he was a married guy. He was a traveling salesman. He's not going to give Elizabeth Short his right name and number. He says he's Robert Morris. Morris was his middle name. He was Robert Morris Manley. He's not going to use his real name. He says, well, I'm Robert Morris, and here's my work number. And so that was kind of what happened with Elizabeth Short, but there's no rhyme or reason to it all. When you read the LAPD summary that's in here, it's not alphabetical, it's not chronological, it is just a mess. And to me, there's no better portrait of the disarray of Elizabeth Short's life than her address book. It is just a mess. Okay, let's see. Was Beth's demise personal to the offender, or was she used by a pervert for sex fantasies like sex works are frequently targeted? Okay, I will defer to John Douglas on this. He said it was personal. It was not just the attack on Elizabeth Short was not Elizabeth Short as just some random woman. This was done to Elizabeth Short as Elizabeth Short. He said, I would assume that the killer and the victim spent some time together. Well, I don't think he called it. I think he called it subject. John Douglas uses the term subject rather than killer. He said, I would think that the subject and the victim spent some time together, and it was personal rather than just a random pickup. That was his insight on it. Certainly, and he said, when you see the kind of injuries that were done to Elizabeth Short, that's a very personal attack, and so I will defer to him on that. But to the best of my knowledge, based on John Douglas's insight, I would say it was personal. It wasn't just it wasn't a random pickup. They spent some time together. Okay. Do I know the identity of the man Detective Ralph Asdell spoke to? I don't. I mean, I get asked the Ralph Asdell question every so often, and I don't know. Ralph became a friend. I got to know him pretty well. He actually, God love him, he went through his garage and dug and dug and dug until he found his notes from the Black Dahlia case. He read them to me over the phone, and I wrote them down. But I don't think he had a name. Ralph Asdell's, just to back up a little bit, Ralph Asdell's was one of the detectives who was loaned to the investigation. Okay, he didn't work robbery homicide, but the Black Dahlia case investigation was so big that they borrowed people from all over the department, and they would do door knocking and stuff like that. And when you see the photograph of Red Manley sniffing purses, the guy holding the purses, that's Ralph Asdell, young Ralph Asdell, and he said, well, at a certain point, he said, I just wanted to get sent back to, I think he was in Boyle Heights. He said, I just want to get sent back to Boyle Heights. Anyway, I don't think I ever got a name. He turned it all over to, as he should have done, to the lead detectives, Harry Hansen and Finus Brown, and they didn't do anything with it. And that was kind of that. All right. Were Barbara Lindgren and Virginia Short actually friends? They went to the same church, but Virginia was only in LA for a brief period. Barbara really likely did us a favor, not out of closeness, tenuous. I had pictures of them together, and not just at the wedding of, I have wedding pictures of Virginia Short and Adrian West, and Barbara Lindgren is in the pictures. But furthermore, I got access through Virginia West. Virginia West is dead, and Adrian West is dead. I would have interviewed them in a heartbeat, but they were both dead. But I got access to Virginia and Adrian West's photographs, and I went through that. And there are much later pictures taken, I think in the 50s sometime, where Virginia Short and Adrian West and Barbara Lindgren are together. So it's like, oh, well, it was just a happenstance. No. I think when I talked to Barbara Lindgren, she minimized it, but the photographs tell a different story. Again, I have photographs of them much later where they're together. So, yeah. Okay. The missing week. There seems sightings and reports of Beth out about in bars and nightclubs. There seemed to be a theme of her with other women and reports from people she knew. Any of those sightings sound credible to you? Okay. This is the missing week question. Is the missing week real? Yes, it is. Regardless of what you will hear from retired Detective 3 Steve Hodel, nobody knows where Elizabeth Short was from the minute she went through the doors of the Biltmore until her body was found. They don't know. All the sightings that you read about in the paper, and there are a million of them. Well, she was seen at this taxi stand. She was seen here. She was seen in this bar. It would be humanly impossible to be in all the places that people saw Elizabeth Short. And a lot of it was just the sensational nature of the murder. It was like, well, I think I saw her. We know that the police tracked down all sorts of sightings, sightings that were never reported in the paper. They did a lot of pick and shovel work on investigating the sightings, and none of them were legit. The important thing to remember is that absolutely nobody who knew Elizabeth Short ever heard from her or saw her again after she was left at the Biltmore. Nobody. Not Ann Toth, not Mark Hansen, no one. And that's really the sadness of it, is that Elizabeth Short was somebody who could disappear for a week and nobody would miss her. You know, that's something. Okay, let's see. Okay. Where am I here? I just read an interview somewhere in which Barbara Lindgren said, yeah, that's what Barbara Lindgren told me as well. I don't think she's being entirely genuine with that, but that is what she told me. I'm not sure she's being entirely forthcoming about that. Okay. Do you think the Black Dahlia killer fits any of the modern behavioral profiling definitions, or something more unusual given the mixed methods? And okay. Profiling and historic cases. Is it valid? And that was one of the things I wrestled with very early on when in my investigation of the Black Dahlia case was, can you apply modern profiling or forensic psychology, or whatever you want to call it, techniques to historic cases? And I think you can, but you need to really be certain of it. One of the cases I looked at was the case of Albert Dyer. Albert Dyer was a crossing guard in Inglewood who was accused and convicted of killing these 3 little girls. They were sex killings. And he had some mental issues, but the killing of these little girls seemed to be very effective. And of course, I think this is yet another one that Steve Hodel says, oh yeah, my dad did that too. You know, every famous case, my dad did that. Anyway, and then I contrasted that with a guy named Otto Stephen Wilson. Wow. Otto Stephen Wilson is wild. Otto Stephen Wilson was this Navy, I think, pharmacist mate who was picking up women in sleazy downtown bars. He would, on the pretense of having sex with them, he would get them up to a hotel room and kill them. He killed a couple women like that. He tried to cut them up. He didn't do a very good job. It took him a long time. But it was just completely different in terms of a kind of a blitz attack. And these women were found where they were killed, that sort of thing. Anyway, so yeah, I think so. And I mean, that's kind of the long introduction to saying, yeah, John Douglas's insights were very valuable to me. I can't thank him enough because his questions were all about the neighborhood. What do you know about the neighborhood? What was it like? That sort of thing. Otherwise I would be out there like everybody else. And that he really sent me off in a different direction in terms of investigating the neighborhood. So, okay. In studying the postmortem pictures, was there any leg hair growth? Stubble could be indication how long she was unable to tend. Perhaps she was actually captive for the last week. The medical, the inquest that was the medical exam that was read into the inquest. And remember, it's incomplete. I think it says her legs were shaved below the knees. I think that's what it says. There are, if you root around the internet, you can find all the morgue shots. They're all online, not in very high resolution. And I'm not sure even higher resolution photographs show in that kind of detail. I mean, when you look at the morgue shots, you can see like binding marks. You can see that. But in terms of whether she shaved her legs or not, I can't tell. Okay. Let's see. I have a feeling that Gordon Fickling is his full name, Frank Gordon Fickling, related to me. This person thinks they're related to Gordon Fickling. No, this was Joseph Gordon Fickling, not Frank Gordon Fickling. He was Joseph Gordon Fickling, but instead of going by Joe, he went by Gordon. So no. Okay. Did Betty... Wait a minute. Where are we here? Did Betty live on Norton when she discovered? You mean Betty Bersinger? Yes. The Bersingers lived on Norton Avenue. Yes. Let's see. Okay. I've already asked that in another comment, but is the autopsy report to be found online? Why hasn't it been released until now? Do you know if the body of Elizabeth Short was exsanguinated while she was alive? Is it possible that the murder bled her to death? Okay. Let's take those questions one at a time. Is the autopsy report online? No, it is not. Okay. Why hasn't it been released until now? Because the LAPD asked the coroner to seal it. That's why. Do you know if the body of Elizabeth Short was exsanguinated while she was still alive? No, Elizabeth Short died of concussion and loss of shock and loss of blood, and mainly loss of blood from this. I think after that, I think she was deceased. But she was hit a couple times right across the forehead, causing concussions. So that is what killed her. But yeah, whoever killed her had to have running water to exsanguinate the body. That happened. So yeah, no, she did not bleed to death. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Bisection was surgically done. Do other cuts indicate surgical knowledge? One theory is a pervert did the main crime and a surgeon helped cover it up. I would say that this was a one person. It was one person all the way through. It wasn't, some maniac. My best take on it, and again, I'm going over the autopsy right now. I'm going to have to talk faster. I'll run out of time here. The bisection was surgically done. I think all of it was. When you look at certainly the removal of the chunk of flesh from her thigh, I believe that was done in a surgical manner. I mean, what was done to her was crazy, for sure. No question about it. But it was someone who had this tremendous skill, but also nuts. That's sort of my garden variety take on it. I am not going to get to all these questions. Let's see. Were all the suspects that are listed on Wikipedia interviewed by the LAPD? I think so. Somebody keeps adding Jacob Edward Fisk to Wikipedia, and I take it out, or the bots take it out, or whatever. If you're listening, somebody with the ISP that begins 47, don't do that. Just knock it off. Okay. We are at 11 o'clock. The time went fast, and I will save the rest of these questions for next time. It's been great. Thanks a lot. And I'll see you in a month. And in a couple of weeks, February 18th, I will be doing the George Hodel, Steve Hodel. Steve's made a lot of bizarre claims. I'm going to have a lot of fun making fun of Steve Hodel. So come back February 18th. Thanks, everybody. Been a great time. Talk to you later.